Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I have a review for you of a very interesting gentleman's folder type knife. That is the Cold Steel TiLite VI. First off, though, I want to thank my buddy Jim for sending it along. It's a very interesting knife. It took me a long time to figure out exactly what to do with it, so I appreciate his patience. But yeah, so thanks very much, Jim. Next thing, let's do a little size comparison. So right here is the Spyderco Delica, and here is the Cold Steel TiLite VI. This knife is freaking ridiculous. I mean, seriously, this knife's blade is almost as long as the Spyderco Delica. Here it is for other size comparison against another token freaking huge knife. That's the ZT452CF. Here it is against the Ontario Rat #1. And the Spyderco Shaman, which is another relatively large little piece here. And then I scoured my home for a knife that I could use as a compelling size comparison, and the only thing I could come up with was out of the garage, this guy. This is a freaking machete, and indeed, this is the only knife I have that dwarfs your TiLite VI. So this knife is maybe a little bit large. Let's just be real here. So anyways, there you go. Let's go into the good, the bad, and the great and ugly. That's right, I said that correctly, of your Cold Steel TiLite here. So on the good side, first off, this knife is actually technically pocketable, meaning it does have a pocket clip, and in fact, in the pants I'm wearing today, which are just normal, pants, jean style thing, these do fit. The depth of this it is using the full depth of my pocket, but it does get down to the clip, and it does stay in there, which is entertaining, 100%. A pocket clip on this knife is a little bit of an afterthought, let's be real here, but it's absolutely... it's there. You can pocket this. And actually, speaking of pocketing this knife, this has this little snag up here on the front now. Ergonomically, yeah, but the thing is, it does have a function. This has very sharp jimping on it, and that jimping, as you're pulling this guy out of your pocket, you can kind of, as you're pulling it, I'm going to use this fabric here as the pocket material. As you're pulling out of there, if you snag the corner of your pocket fabric, I'm going to try and do this here, you can basically have it so that as you pull, the knife opens up. There you go. And that's actually kind of neat. It emulates in a lot of ways the Emerson Wave style opening mechanism, where you can pull this out of your pants in such a way that the act of pulling it out of the pants flies the blade open. This is something that maybe not for the faint of heart, and it will absolutely take a toll on your pants, because this is very, very sharp here. But it is there, and it does add another level to the jackassitude of this knife, so that's nice. Next thing, this has a very nice deployment, honestly. Uses this nice tall thumb stud here, and it is able to be deployed straightforwardly. I'm going to back away so I don't eviscerate myself here. There we go. And indeed, just using the thumb stud with no wrist action or anything, I can fly this guy open, no problem. And it's smooth enough that I can do it reliably, and especially with a little bit of wrist, this opens authoritatively. I have no problem with the deployment of this knife. It works very nicely. Next thing, when it deploys, you can hear a really satisfying snap open as this liner lock slides into place. You can see it's using a relatively short liner lock bar. It's only about this long total, which leads to a little bit of extra strength. And it makes this guy quite... solidly locked up. There's no concern about safety here whatsoever. That's nice, and actually that's the next good point, is that there is no concern about safety with this knife. A lot of knives that are really intended to be ridiculous or rowdy or just jackassy overall are not safe. They're knives that are meant to look something interesting, they're meant to look big or intimidating or whatever, but they're actually a danger to you, because they can fall apart. But this guy actually feels very solid. That's one thing I have to, every day of the week, give Cold Steel credit for. Every knife that they make is solid and reasonably safe. It's not going to hurt you in any way, and it's probably not going to fail unless you really try hard to make it fail. And indeed, I feel like that's the case with this guy as well. This is a knife that is pretty damn solid. Next thing, the value on this guy is actually not as bad as I expected. You're looking at $60 here. That's a lot of money, but this is a lot of knife. And so, I feel like value-wise, they couldn't really charge that much more for this, given what it is. But it's okay. I got no problems there. Then finally, there are a couple of nice little details I have to point out here. For instance, the jimping on the top of this liner lock. They could have just left this as a sort of a flat spring sort of top liner lock, like on this little guy, the Rat 1, but instead they give you this whole big surface and they put a bunch of jimping on there. And that really makes this easier to open. It's something that I appreciated very much. The length of the thumb stud is another great little detail. I mean, you can tell that somebody at Cold Steel was absolutely thinking this through, and that's something I do appreciate. And so, to me at least, all that is the good, is that there are some things that made me think that, oh, somebody's really thinking about how to optimally design this big old jackassy knife. It's safe, it's solid, the value is actually, I think, okay. It's got a nice deployment, strong line of lock, it's got that wavy feature to it, and it is technically pocketable. Let's talk about what's bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, this is going to absolutely just send some Cold Steel fanboys into some sort of a coma, because, you see, this is a Cold Steel knife, but it doesn't have the triad lock, and this puts them in a very unfortunate situation where the triad lock is the only good lock ever, according to Cold Steel fanboys, yet Cold Steel doesn't make anything bad. So they're going to have to really work their way through this one, negotiating the cognitive dissonance of Cold Steel but no triad lock. Is it still a good knife? Only they're going to be able to find out. Practically speaking, though, it's fine. Liner locks are just as secure as triad locks in many, many situations. A short one like this has been built very nicely. It's plenty strong. I actually asked Lynn Thompson about that at Blade Show, and at which point he pulled one of these guys out of his waistband, and maybe he already had. Either way, which pretty much confirmed everything I thought I knew about Lynn Thompson, both for good and for bad. And his explanation is just that there's not enough room up here for a triad lock. They couldn't have done it. So that's why, but still, that's going to really probably hurt some fanboys as they try and negotiate that one in their inner selves there. Next thing, AUS-8 steel. This is using AUS-8 steel. Much of Cold Steel's lineup has gone to XHP. AUS-8A steel is fine, I guess. It's either barely adequate or barely inadequate, but the thing is, for a knife like this that isn't really intended for everyday carry, I think it's probably a good choice. It's easy to sharpen out. When you damage it while jackassing, it's going to be okay, and this helps to keep the price down, and let's be real here, this is a knife that is most useful when it's available at lower prices. Next thing, ergonomically speaking, it's a little bit stupid up at the top here, because I want to choke up on this guy if I actually want to try and use this for cutting, which I don't, honestly, but I want to choke up. But unfortunately, that means my thumb is on top of this guy and my other finger is down here, and both of these are very sharp, as they need to be to hook onto the pocket. Look, this is a knife that's really best held in a hammer grip, either, closer to here or back to here. It doesn't particularly work in the saber grip I tend to favor. You can do it, but I don't love it. But then again, I'm considering this to be an everyday carry knife in this review, and that's not a good premise, let's be real here. Next thing I gotta say, the jimping on these tabs, especially this bottom one here, which is actually not used for anything particularly. It's not like a flip or anything. It's just over sharp. I think they would have been better off, especially on this bottom one, to leave that unsharpened, so to speak, to use a less aggressive jimping. I think that would be a much better choice. Maybe you could argue it's a blade guard. Ow. You son of a... So, there was a little bit of an unintended edit there. Turns out that's a really crappy blade guard, because it's very easy to slide right up past this and over onto the blade, at which point the knife will cut you open. Guys, I'm not a brilliant man, although actually, entertainingly, this is the very first time I have been cut on camera by a knife. So there you go. Hopefully that was that was interesting to you. But anyways, I think that this jimping is either not aggressive enough to stop certain idiots, or just too damned aggressive for any other purpose. Freaking hurt. So anyways, that's the bad, is that Cold Steel has done some unpleasant things. The jimping on the tab here is not quite sharp. The knife did actually just try to kill me on camera. The sharpening choil, I forgot to mention this, isn't a sharpening choil. See, it's dull up to this point, although not dull long enough. Jackass. It's ergonomically a little bit stupid at the top. It's AUS-8A steel, and it is a liner lock rather than a triad lock. So that's the bad. I can't believe I just freaking cut myself. I'll leave it in. Why not, right? So let's go into the great and the ugly. So, to me, what is great And what is ugly about this knife is that it is absolutely freaking absurd. At some level, this knife is great because it is absurd. This is a knife that is really meant for comedy. You pull this knife out for effect. You take this out of your pocket and bust this out because you want to take this out of your pocket and bust this out. It is like a stiletto, which is itself a little bit silly already, but then they doubled down and made it huge. And so if you take this guy out at a barbecue full of like-minded friends, people are going to laugh and or run. And, this is a knife that really does feel purpose-built for the kinds of silly shenanigans that Cold Steel is famous for. This knife is just begging for boots full of meat. I mean, heck, given the chance, it went after flesh on camera. This has a hunger, people. Let's be real here. And so this is much like the Espada XL, a knife that is meant entirely for jackassery. There is no other reason for this knife. The thing is, this knife is also ugly because it is absurd. It is too large for most uses. It's too unwieldy, I think, for many other uses. It's going to send people running in any other circumstance. This is not a knife that you can take out of your pocket there to cut off a piece of fabric on a sweater or a thread or something on a sweater in the middle of a Starbucks. No, that's going to be a war crime. And so this is a knife that is both impractical at the ergonomic level as well as at the actual cutting things, except Nick Shabazz. This is very good at cutting Nick Shabazz level, and it's also just, it's not something you're going to want in a lot of situations. And so this knife is great because it is completely absurd, but it is also ugly because it is completely absurd. And so only you, knowing the balance of your life, are going to know how to handle this guy and whether it makes sense for you. But let's go into the final conclusion. So look, final conclusion, this took me a long time to get around the review. I batted around all kinds of different ways to handle this, from the comedic angles, the modern art review, the gentleman's knife sort of thing. I struggled literally for months trying to figure out how to treat this guy. But ultimately, I kind of realized that the very best absurdity and the best way to handle this guy comedically is just to look at the freaking knife. It's hilarious in and of itself. Anything I did would be gilding the ridiculous lily that is this knife. And indeed, it is ridiculous. And, at that level, that's a beautiful thing and a terrible thing. This is another in a long line of jackassing knives for Cold Steel. You buy this knife to be a jackass, and that's not a subject of judgment. We're all jackasses from time to time. Whether it's of the good variety, the bad variety of jackassing, whether you're pulling this out at a barbecue for a laugh or you're pulling it out because you think you're a badass and you're actually not, carrying and using this knife is jackassy. Whatever you do with this knife, you'll be doing it jackassily. Hell, I just tried to review it, tried to show off a blade guard, and I came off looking like a jackass. See, it's like the freaking ring from Lord of the Rings. It just exudes that aura. It brings everybody into that. It's sooner or later, it's going to be my jackassy precious here. But the thing is, with all that said, this is well done for that purpose. They have made a knife that is reasonably safe and well built for doing that. Unlike a lot of your entries in that category, the stuff you see in catalogs or in that crazy store in the mall, this is well built. It's got a solid lockup. It's got reasonable construction, good materials. It feels like a decent knife, and it actually cuts things, unfortunately. And you've got a company that can help you if something goes wrong, although different kinds of wrong. So anyways, my final conclusion here, aside from screw you knife, is that if you're looking for a huge jackassy and ridiculous knife, which is also reasonably safe and not incredibly pricey, then I think Cold Steel is going to be your one-stop shop, and your TiLite is absolutely going to be good for you. Hope this has been interesting, that this review was a cut above all the other ones. That you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Ay, ay, ay. Not my finest hour, guys. Bye now.